Hello, everybody. My name is Joel Filderman, and welcome to the Dog Trainers Connection. I'm not a dog trainer, but all these other people you see here are, and they have a number of years of experience in the dog training world. We get together, we discuss a topic, we come up with some thoughts, some ideas, and sometimes some answers. Last week, we discussed stress in trainers. This week, I'd like to just discuss stress in dogs. I don't know if anybody saw it, but there was a fairly recent study in Portugal, I believe it was, where they were comparing positive to aversive training techniques. And at least according to them, they were saying it was the first long-term study that they've done on that. And the way they did it was initially they just did a positive versus aversive and looked for stress signs and things like that. They were videoing them. But what they did was after the dogs had been in either the positive or aversive training for a month, they gave them a version of another psychological test. But what they did is they put a bowl in a room that had sausage, and the dog either went to it or it didn't. And eventually what they did was they would move the sausage around. And according to the study, what they're saying is that the ones who took the aversive training were much more cautious and much more basically anxious and depressed about it. So they're saying that, okay, this proves long term that aversive is not good. So I'd like to know what you think, trainers. So I will just throw it out there, and whoever would like to start can start.
Well, having trained from both sides, I do agree with that. Aversive training tends to make a dog, in my opinion and in my experience, that doesn't like to try things because mistakes are punished. Whereas positive reinforcement training, you have a dog that will experiment. And that's a double-edged sword too, because, you know, you ask for one thing and you get 50 behaviors. You want this, you want this, you want this. Well, how about I do this? Want this, want this. But that's fixable too. So I've seen it. I've seen where dogs trained using aversive techniques look really well trained, really sharp, really well trained. But they don't try things. They don't problem solve as well, in my opinion, in my experience. And so having trained both ways, I do prefer the positive reinforcement. I think long-term effects, I have happier dogs. My own dogs are happier. They're much more pleasant to be around than my dogs from the past that were trained aversively.
Okay. Jeff, what are you thinking?
Okay.
Good deep breath. I love you, Jeff.
Oh, boy.
So first of all, it doesn't matter what I say. Somebody out there is going to twist my words and get their panties in a bunch. So I'm just going to say what's on my mind.
There you go.
First and foremost, I believe that humans are jealous that dogs can deal with stress better than we can. So I'll get that out of there.
That's an interesting point.
Okay? Because humankind are a bunch of wackos who can't deal with stress and hang on to it forever. So that's that. Number two, aversive training, and I'm assuming, I don't know the study, but I'm assuming that the dogs the trainers implemented aversive techniques to teach dogs new behaviors. Is that what it was, Joel?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So, I mean, everybody knows I'm an operative conditioning guy. It's no secret. When I am teaching new behaviors, I only use positive reinforcement. That's just me. I'm not saying that the other side is wrong, but when I'm teaching obedience or I'm teaching new behaviors, everyone knows I'm a huge proponent of physical and verbal praise and massage as, a good positive physical reward. So I do believe when teaching new behaviors, positive reinforcement, in my opinion, obviously it puts the common dog owner in a better position to follow up on training. number one. Number two, it gets the dog working first and foremost for treats. Okay. And then obviously it's an easier segue to start weaning the dog off of treats and start, weaning the dog onto other, again, physical verbal praise. As far as aversive training for behavior modification, which is usually where I think the biggest controversy falls when it comes to different sides of the training spectrum, training tools, walking tools, things along those lines. First and foremost, if you are using a training tool and it's causing stress and it's causing the dog to shut down, you're doing it wrong. I don't care what anybody says, you're doing it wrong or you're doing it on the wrong dog. Okay. And again, I know that people are going to have their own opinion. I really don't care. Cause obviously I've used training tools and I've worked a lot with behavior modification on thousands of dogs and never abused one. There's been dogs that I chose the wrong tool and I had to stop, right? And that's my responsibility as a trainer to know the dog I'm working. There's been other incidents where the owners were uncomfortable. So I have to make sure that I have flexibility as a trainer. Now, to the word aversive. Okay. I don't know what training they were doing.
Well, I can tell you, because at least from the article, it says choke collars, spray corrections, and acting in a threatening manner by yelling or confronting the dog.
Okay, so they were stupid. Okay, got it. Okay, so they were friggin' idiots. Got it. Okay, so now we have a study conducted by people, implemented by morons. And we're talking, and get this, someday this is going to be science. Okay,
well,
just so you know.
What they're basically trying to prove.
Yeah. So they proved that a bunch of friggin' assholes abusing dogs causes problems. Whoa! Really? Oh my God! You know what? I am so glad I came to this forum today because I wouldn't have known that then.
What did you say, Helen?
But there are a lot of trainers who train that way.
I understand that now. So that's not aversive training. That's inhumane training. Aversive training is defined by the dog, not people.
Okay.
That's where we get screwed up. Just like a positive reward is defined by the dog, not people. Okay. You could knee, let's say you have a jumping dog, right? Let's say it's a collie. The collie jumps, you knee it in the chest, right? That's going to be really invasive and aversive. You do that to a boxer or a pit bull, it's playtime.
Okay.
So the reinforcement, the reward is defined by the dog. The same with aversives. You could use a squirt bottle. I've used a squirt bottle on my dogs. All I got to do is pick it up. You can clearly see that there was some kind of
cognitive function, that
assertive tone by me that preceded the squirt of the water bottle. We're talking about a little plant mister, okay? The little plant mister that the entire force-free community demonizes, okay? Little plant mister, and I get it. I understand. I'm not criticizing them. They have every right to have their opinion. Well, if my dog is afraid of a little tiny squirt bottle, right, that's this big, why does she go after the hose when I'm hosing down the sidewalk on stream? Got nothing to do with the water. It has to do with what precedes the water, right? So my dogs define what the aversive is. The aversive is not water.
Right.
Me and my energy that precedes the physical act of squirting a bottle. Otherwise, if that was the case, she would generalize with all water. So again, aversives are defined by the dogs, not us. Rewards are defined by the dogs, not us. It's our responsibility to decipher that. And here's a study I did, okay? I did a poll of 1,000 assholes, okay? And I asked them a series of questions. 87% of them remained to be assholes. Okay, I'm going to release this study next year. Because I have a PhD, it'll be science. That's all I got.
All right. Bonnie, you look like you had something to say there.
No, I was interested in what Helen said about her dogs, that the ones that she trained strictly aversive training, you said they weren't as pleasant or relaxed to live with, but what about the rest of your relationship with the dogs? Did you play with them? Did they have other enrichment that was appropriate for their breed? Or okay.
Absolutely. But
So how were they? I found that interesting.
They were not as willing to try things.
To experiment.
What were you teaching them?
Well, mostly, first of all, manners, basic manners, but then,
Well, specifically, what were you teaching them where an aversive backfired?
No, I'm saying in the long term, as they got older and we would do different things, and I actually was crossing over and using reward-based training. They were not as willing to try things.
I understand that, but we're talking when you use an aversive to teach a specific behavior.
Yes.
What specific behaviors were you teaching with aversives?
Sit down, stay.
Okay. So you were choking them. You were choking them into
popping the leash with a
pop. Leash pops. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Leash pops.
And I think we could all agree that's wrong.
Well, I didn't know any better back then.
Yeah, neither did I. I used to do the same
We're
shit.
talking. We're talking well over.
Go ahead, Steve.
I know.
Wait. Go ahead, Steve.
I know people that crank the leash pretty well, and it looks like an art form. It looks like a dance at the end of the day. I'm not talking about a dog with its tail down. I'm talking about a dog with its tail up, head up, smile on face, and just got cranked on a right about turn. I mean, bam, you probably hear, and here comes the dog flying up on the left side, happy to be there, not scared, not have to have the right dog. So what I'm saying is it's not all about the technique. We can say we don't like that. We can say, I myself used a clicker to teach him to heel in the house, no leash. That's my strategy. I don't make it about the leash at all. But if I'm going to make it about the leash, and you present me with a 4-year-old male lab that's been yanking for like quite a while, and I break out the food and, well, I'll try. But if it doesn't happen, am I going to let the client get yoked down the street for the rest of the dog's life, another 10 years? I don't think so. We're going to go outside, take a little walk. And I'm going to play my Keeler right about turn story, real quick. But I'm not a mad guy. I'm not angry. I'm not, scaring the crap out of the dog. But if it's one of these, I'm going there. And in about 10 or 15 minutes, usually, if I don't get real dizzy, that dog's walking at my left side to avoid the right about turn and the crank. What's it doing? It's looking at me because that's the only way it's going to know where the hell I'm walking, because I ain't telling.
Well, that brings up a question that I had, Steve, which was one of the other articles about this said that this doesn't help the relationship between the owner and the dog by doing aversives.
Well, what do you think?
Do you find that true or no?
I think it's hard to teach a dog owner how to use a leash and a collar correctly. Okay. I can easily say that, which is why I don't use it as much, because, I can't leave it behind and trust that they're going to do it well. But the strategy itself, it's just like Jeff said, these people who did this thing, you're going to yell at the dog and all that. I mean, come on. Aversion is something you got to, you want to avoid, right? You want to avoid this correction. This is what you're going to do. That doesn't mean I can't feed you after you come around either, by the way. There's no rule. There's no standard rule about that.
Sure.
If the dog should not be, if the dog's afraid, you're not doing it right, or you shouldn't be doing it to that dog. That's all there is to it. But if you say, what about the relationship? If the owner does it and is good at it, what's the relationship? It's better than it was when the owner was getting yanked out the door, yanked down the stairs, pulled down on their chest. You got to think about what's the whole picture look like. And people are being abused by their wild ass dogs. Those dogs need a little bit of a tune-up, That doesn't mean you're angry. It's just, if you've got the skill, I say it's fine. It's all very individual. I can't look at a technique like that. That's what they're trying to do, I feel like. It's like, make it all about, you can't do this and you can't do that. There's some guy, I guess maybe I see him on Instagram or Twitter or something, and this guy's using an electric collar. And last week he posted some dead lambs because he lives in farm country. I mean, chewed up by dogs, lambs. And he actually shows, like people say, oh, no, you got to keep the dog on a leash if it's going to behave that way. This guy got a remote collar on the dogs. He recalls them from the field. They're like 2 inches from the damn sheep. recall, come. The dogs spin around, come running back. They're not crawling on their bellies. They're happy to come back. But they don't really like that sensation they get anymore around those lambs, and those lambs aren't going to be killed. So now where do you put it? I hate the invisible fence system, honestly. I shouldn't call it invisible fence. Let's say underground electric containment.
Sure.
Not my favorite.
Yeah.
If it keeps a dog from getting killed in the road, it's better than nothing. That's where I'm going. So I think you got to try and balance it. So, in the famous words of who knows, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And, I was going to say too that I know with my first dog using aversives and the dominant down, putting the dog on its side and holding it, that my trainer did with our dog Ingrid, and I did some things too that was like popping, and she wouldn't stop pulling, and she was an elk hound, for God's sake, but it didn't ruin who she was. That I made mistakes, I felt guilty when I learned better, but I had a good relationship with her, and she was, she bounced back. Even at the beginning when I was doing too much training with her, I think she was shutting down. And when I was trying to force doing obedience, and a trainer said to me, Bonnie, you need to take a break with her. And I just didn't do anything for 3 months, but have fun and let her off the leash in the park. And she was fine, and we were bonded like hell, and it was great. And I did some things that I think back, but then again,
it was back then. We all did that.
Oh yeah, I did the same thing.
It was back then, but I'm gonna let you go in a second, Dave. I just wanted to finish.
No, go ahead.
But people are. The thing is that everybody tells their dog, cut it out, or no, or we're all like not all positive, because that wouldn't be good for the dog. And they need boundaries. They're like children, they need some boundaries, or else they're going to go get killed, run out in the road. So I think, I think it's just like you said, Steve, moving on, and Jeff and Helen, it's like you learn, you see what works with your dogs. You look at the dog in front of you, like you said, Jeff, and not look at everything in black and white, and be open and learn, and and try not to feel guilty for
what was that?
Can't do that nowadays. There is no gray area. They don't allow us to have a gray area. That's what's sad about the dog training arena.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I mean,
that's really where my frustration comes from, really, honestly. I mean, obviously I got animated, but I always get animated, but it's the frustration of people being judgmental for situations that they have no idea what's going on. Like sure. Steve, with the person dragging the dog dragging their person out of the door, that dog's not going to be walked anymore, ever, unless that's fixed. So by Steve's theory, Steve hangs out with that dog for 15 minutes and automatically improves that dog's quality of life. How is that wrong?
David, what were you going to say?
No, I'm pretty much on board with everybody. I think it really comes down to how do you define an aversive? What's an aversive to one dog may not be an aversive to another dog, and unless you're talking really extreme, like Jeff, what you were saying, yelling and pulling like crazy. I mean, if you're strong enough and you got a good, strong, solid voice, almost any dog is gonna fight or flight kind of thing on something like that. So it really comes down to that. And then there's the type of aversives where you have like the spray cans with the air that the motion sensors, and the dog tries to jump off the table. Some dogs could care less about it. Some dogs will freak out. So it's just a question of watching that body language. If the dog is freaking out and is scared by it, is that a good thing? I mean, common sense says no. And then you guys can look at some of these studies, kind of like there's a study like Jeff. I think you're right. Like, what about some of these studies from years ago when they're saying aversives are no good? Well, again, how do you define aversives? How was the study conducted? Were they doing things like this, and that's how they're defining that aversives are no good? I mean, I think that gets down to that gray area. Even though I learned the traditional way too. and I wasn't comfortable with it. And I could see if I was popping on that leash, and even if you're popping on it correctly, some dogs would kind of shut down a little bit. Some dogs would comply, and it seems like, hey, gravy, we got this thing going. So it's one of those it depends things, but nonetheless, I still err on the side of keeping it as gentle methods as possible, the way I like to put it. Without any pops or anything like that. And if the dog can comply with, with foods, with treats, with a body rub, with toys, whatever it is that motivates that dog, why not use that than yelling?
Lima, right?
What's that?
Invasive, minimally aversive.
Yeah.
That's the key. But I would have to say that one piece of the study that suggests that the dogs that were trained by positive reinforcement are more open to investigation and things like that. Because let's face it, if you use the clicker, you don't train the commands, you train the behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about any cues at all. It's about behavior. So the animal has to figure out by itself. In the very early stages of teaching, it has to figure out how to get clicked to get the food, right?
Yeah.
So if it's already experimenting that way, then it makes sense to say as the dog matures, that, even if you swap later to whatever, chain collar or whatever, I think that if a dog has been given opportunity as a puppy to work things out somehow, even if it's aversive, the spray thing that David's talking about, if you leave it on the counter and the dog jumps up and it gets sprayed and that hideous noise comes out, hopefully you'll get avoidance and the dog will stop jumping on the counter. That's what it's about. If you're looking for an aversive, that thing's aversive. If it
right.
works,
Same thing like with you don't want the dog on the couch. You put like an X mat, or you put the underneath side part of a door, a car mat, or carpet runner. Is that aversive?
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the dog. I guess it is, but maybe some dogs can tolerate, can care less.
Yeah, there's no association with their human, so they'll be dissociated from any trust issues.
That too. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Remote corrections. Perfect.
Right. They won't associate it with their human, but in my experience, those kinds of things tend to escalate. In other words, it's the scat mat, which gives a static shock. So the dog or cat, whatever, learns that, I can't go there because that mat's there.
Mm-hmm.
Start getting leery of other mats and throw rugs and then it just fears grow.
Nervous. I agree with you, Helen.
My dog, she gets afraid of something, it'll grow quickly. Something happens, we had some work done and something fell off the wall and landed near her, freaked her out. And I had to do a lot of work with her after that because I knew what was going to happen is it was going to, those sounds were going to start to bother her and then she was going to be afraid of the room. These things tend to grow. If the scat mat works, the sensitivity to it can escalate to other things.
Well, Helen, so one of the questions I was going to ask was that one of the parts of the study was the cortisol levels. And they found that, at least in the study, that the dogs who had the quote-unquote aversive training that had higher cortisol levels. So do you think that that's part of it?
Oh, my God, really? They're really reporting this?
That's what they reported, Jeff.
That's what happens to mammals. Holy crap.
That's just a fact. Stress creates cortisol. So
right.
Arousal spikes cortisol.
Okay.
Not stress, arousal. Oh my goodness.
Stress. It could be
not you, Helen. I'm sorry.
and I'm only quoting what's in the article, Jeff.
Because they want to prove a point. That's why.
And that's exactly my point. Yeah.
It's stress, but it could be distress or eustress.
But
it can be what? Distress or
like cortisol.
Or eustress. Eustress is good stress. Like you like a roller coaster, but it's kind of it. But that's
endorphins, etc.
Well, there's another study. I didn't finish reading the article. It's a little bit off topic, but still related to stress, where where the old saying would be like, let's say a dog is freaked out by thunder, and you're going to go, oh, it's okay, baby, it's okay, it's going to be okay.
Right.
So they always would say, and I always was telling everyone, my only clients, this, you don't want to do that, just make it like it's no big deal, because otherwise, now they're going to have a fear of that thunder or that lightning.
I've seen
part of this study.
Yep.
I think it was a small study. I think it was like 10 dogs, which is not really much of a study to me.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, they were basically saying there's not much of a difference one way or the other.
Right.
I didn't finish reading the whole article, but
Yeah.
And
I don't know.
it depends on the dogs too.
I think so. Yeah.
And
It's too
also,
small of a sampling.
yeah,
100%.
and maybe if people got mad at their dog, like if a dog's jumping on the counter, and if they yelled or clapped their hands or said, "Hey, off," maybe that would work too.
Yeah, but maybe then
Yeah,
the
but
dog
only
would
when the owner's present.
Exactly. Only in the presence of the owner, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't generalize so much, which is why, unless you have a really sensitive dog, I wouldn't think, or cat, that if the cat jumped on the counter and got a static shock, I would say more animals than not would not be weary of other mats. But there are, of course, those that would, because for some reason, just they're overly.
They associate.
It's their character,
Yeah.
they said, all right, this has happened to me here, who knows? But a lot of them would be specific to the location, which doesn't help another tabletop, right? Which, that's when it gets tricky, when you start moving the mat around and the cat, oh, geez, maybe it's everywhere, so you got to be careful when you're doing this stuff.
Yeah.
But that's the terrific thing too about dog training and dog trainers, is that I might not want to go there and use that, but somebody else will, and use it effectively and know what kind of dog that the scat mat is good for. Or I may say, I'm going to turn your case over to somebody else because I can't handle it. If that particular person say, an e-collar is the only way to handle some situation. So I think that's the good thing about dog training and dog trainers, that we all don't have to use the same equipment, feel comfortable personally with the same equipment, and that's okay.
But it's not, because there's a part of the dog training arena that is trying to eradicate tools.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big problem, Bonnie. They're trying to ban tools altogether.
Yeah.
That's a problem for me. Not for me as a trainer, for me as, being in the dog training arena.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons that we can't get into tonight.
And Jeff, you're saying tools that could work.
Types of collars.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about a scat mat.
No, I understand, but
Martingales,
yeah,
gentle leaders, halties,
yeah,
tools like that they're trying to ban because they feel that they are abusive.
Don't worry, they won't be successful.
Oh, I'm not worried. Because
Okay.
if something happens, I'm okay. I've been doing this long enough. I don't need tools. They just come in handy sometimes.
Well, I think that's a good place to stop. I think this was a very, very interesting conversation. You can look for Jeff's study of the assholes coming out soon.
In theaters near you.
Near you.
And
AMC,
also,
I think, right? No.
Joel, we're going to have to post the link to this Portuguese study so
yes,
people can
we
check
will post
that out.
the link below that. I think there were a lot of different thoughts, a lot of different discussions, and as usual, it's complicated, but I think there was a good discussion about it. So I'd like to thank you all for being here today. I'd like to thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot now. Bye-bye.
See ya.